When you think of Vikings, what comes to mind? Fierce warriors, horned helmets, long ships cutting through icy seas? The truth is, Viking life was far more savage than any Hollywood movie shows. They lived in a world where violence, fear, and harsh survival ruled every single day. From their deadly rituals to harsh punishments, the Vikings were a people shaped by blood, ice, and battle. Today, we're diving into 20 of the most brutal, jaw-dropping facts about Viking life you've probably never heard of. Stick around. Number 17 will leave you stunned. Fact number 1. The infamous blood eagle. This was not just a punishment. It was a statement. The victim's ribs were sliced open from the spine, pulled outward like wings, and their lungs were dragged out, all while they were still alive. It was said to honor Odin and terrify enemies. Some historians argue whether it really happened, but detailed descriptions exist in Norse sagas like the Orkneyinga saga and the tale of Ragnar Lodbrok. Even if exaggerated, the idea alone reflects the sheer brutality of Viking justice. They didn't just kill you, they made it a legend. Fact number 2, the exposure of unwanted infants. Viking families didn't always keep their children. If a baby was born weak, sickly, disabled, or out of wedlock, they might simply be left outside to freeze. This practice, known as exposure, was common in ancient times, and the Vikings were no exception. A father could legally reject his child, and the community would accept it as normal. No burial, no naming, just nature deciding their fate. It sounds horrific to us, but for Vikings, survival came before sentiment. Fact number 3, endless raiding. Vikings are known as raiders for a reason. Young men would leave their homes in longships to travel across Europe, burning villages, looting monasteries, and taking prisoners. Some of these men were as young as 16. They faced stormy seas, starvation, and brutal combat. Many didn't survive, but for them, death in battle was the key to reaching Valhalla, a glorious afterlife for fallen warriors. Raiding was dangerous, but it was also their economy, their culture, and their destiny. Fact number 4, brutal justice. Vikings had laws, but they were enforced harshly and quickly. There were no prisons. Instead, penalties ranged from exile to execution. A thief might be branded, mutilated, or declared an outlaw, meaning anyone could kill them without consequence. The thing is, being outlawed didn't just mean exile. It meant you no longer had a place in society. You were hunted. Viking law was fast, bloody, and final. Fact number 5, human sacrifice. The Vikings worshipped many gods, and they believed those gods needed offerings. Animals were common, but sometimes humans were chosen. Slaves and prisoners of war were sacrificed during major festivals like Yule, or in times of great need, to ask the gods for victory, good harvests, or protection. Eyewitness accounts from travelers like Ahmad ibn Fadlan describe grisly scenes, including strangling and stabbing victims to please Odin. It wasn't madness, it was religion. And for the Vikings, faith meant blood. Fact number 6, dangerous hygiene. Ironically, Vikings were cleaner than most medieval Europeans. They bathed weekly and even had special tools for grooming, tweezers, razors, combs. But their soap, made with lye, a caustic substance that could cause burns if used wrong. Tooth care involved scraping with animal bones. Grooming was a sign of status and pride. but came with risks. Even being clean was a challenge in their harsh world. Fact number 7. Deadly duels. In Viking society, arguments weren't always solved with words. If things got serious, they turned to a ritual called holmgang. 2 men entered a circle, and only one was guaranteed to leave. They'd agree on weapons, rules, even a referee. But once the blades were drawn, things turned violent fast. Holmgangs could be over money, land, or honor. One wrong move, and you lost everything. Fact number 8. Winters and hunger. Scandinavia is cold. Back then, it was even worse. Snow, ice, and darkness covered the land for months. If crops failed, people starved. Families dried fish, salted meat, and stored grain, but supplies often ran out. Entire villages could be wiped out by a bad winter. Surviving meant planning, strength, and a little luck. Fact number 9. Short lives. Vikings rarely made it to old age. Most people died before 50, taken by war, disease, accidents, or exposure. Childbirth was dangerous. Infections were common. Medical knowledge was minimal. If you lived past 60, you were honored as a true survivor. Their world wasn't made for comfort. It was made for endurance. Fact number 10. Slavery. Slavery was a core part of Viking society. Thralls, the name for Viking slaves, could be bought, sold, gifted, or sacrificed. They built houses, worked farms, rowed ships, and did whatever their masters commanded. They had no rights, and their lives were disposable. Vikings didn't just fight for wealth, they created it by owning people. Fact number 11. Berserkers. These were Viking warriors who fought in a trance-like fury. Some say they wore bear or wolf skins. Others believe they used drugs or rituals to enter a rage. They charged without fear, immune to pain, screaming like animals. Enemies feared them. Allies respected them. Berserkers were not just fighters. They were living weapons. Fact number 12. Trial by ordeal. If someone was accused of a crime, they might have to grab a hot iron or walk over fire. If their wounds healed clean, they were innocent. If not, guilty, punished. Justice wasn't about evidence, it was about fate and scars. Fact number 13. Violent games. Vikings played sports, but they were brutal. Wrestling, stone lifting, and a ball game called Natleker, which often ended with broken bones. Some games were so violent that people died. Entertainment was raw, risky, and very real. Fact number 14. Burial with weapons. Vikings believed warriors needed weapons in the afterlife. Men were buried with swords, axes, and shields, ready for battles in Valhalla. The more powerful the man, the more elaborate the grave. Death wasn't the end. It was a new beginning, fully armed. Fact number 15. Women's lives. While Viking women had more rights than in many ancient cultures, many were still treated as property. Some men had multiple wives. Arranged marriages were common. Divorce was allowed, but not always fair. A woman's freedom depended on her husband's mood or mercy. Fact number 16. Ship burials. Some Vikings were buried in actual ships, filled with goods, weapons, and even sacrificed animals or people. These ceremonies were reserved for the elite. The goal? To send the dead on their final voyage to the land of the gods. Fact number 17. Tattoos. Accounts from Arab travelers mention Viking warriors covered in tattoos from fingers to necks. They used dark green or blue ink, possibly with runes or tribal patterns. For Vikings, the body was a canvas, a record of strength, loyalty, and battle. Fact number 18. Cannibalism. Though rare, some records suggest that in extreme famines, some Viking settlements may have turned to cannibalism. Winter, starvation, and no other choice. A horrifying reminder of how brutal survival could become. Fact number 19. Death oaths and curses. Vikings believed in powerful verbal magic. A curse or blood oath could bind people across generations. Breaking an oath meant disgrace or death by the god's wrath. Words were weapons, and sometimes worse than blades. Fact number 20. Hallucinogenic rituals. Some Viking shamans, called vulvas or seers, used hallucinogenic mushrooms or herbal brews to enter trance states. These rituals were used to predict the future, speak to the gods, or channel spiritual power before battle. The visions were chaotic, sometimes terrifying. But for Vikings, the line between the physical and spiritual worlds was thin, and sometimes crossed with fire and fungi. Fear and insight often came hand in hand, so now you know. Viking life was more brutal, more violent, and more terrifying than most people imagine. They were more than warriors. They were survivors in a ruthless world. Which fact shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments. And subscribe for more dark truths from history. Until next time, stay curious.